In three, two, one. There you go. Good
Hello.
afternoon, Crystal. How are you, ma'am?
I am well. And yourself?
I'm great. I'm great. Did you watch the Super Bowl?
No, I did not.
Oh,
I was working on this client that I thought today was the deadline. So, because they had to have this in to keep her from losing her business. And it turns out they had gotten an extension to March. So I was
oh,
working all afternoon and well into the middle of the night last night. I went
oh
to
my
sleep
gosh!
at 2:30.
Wow,
So
wow. You don't seem cranky. You should be
it,
cranky.
I'm holding it in.
Well,
God,
okay. Well, let's get started so you can go to sleep. Okay. So we've got a. This is a pretty interesting subject here that we're going to talk about today. Um, And I really want to get your viewpoint, even though you're sleepy, on it
uh,
because
I can always
I
rise
think
to the occasion.
I think you've got some pretty interesting things to talk about with regard.
Okay.
It's all about auto enrollment,
Okay.
and uh, the problem is that many plans they think that auto enrollment is the deal. So auto enrollment, if you're not sure, that's when usually the company will say after X amount of months, you are automatically enrolled in the plan.
Oh, okay.
And then sometimes they just stop there. They're automatically enrolled. Typically, they have to use a 1% or 2%, but then they just stop. So, what I wanted to talk about now was how to improve that system, right?
Okay.
Because it's just the beginning. So, I tell you what, I'll read your bio, and then if you have some comments about that, then we
Okay.
can have them in and talk about them.
Sounds
Okay.
good. Hmm.
So, hello everyone. Welcome to On the Patio with Crystal and JEVON. I'm a retirement plan advisor. I specialize in retirement plans for companies. And Crystal Mitchell is a business coach and consultant. And here is her bio. So, Crystal, she is a business coach and consultant. She's the CEO of Mitchell Business Solutions. She's the co director of Recycling Black Dollars. She's the co host of The Business Zone with Crystal and Gilbert. That's another online radio show that she does. She's an instructor at Mount San Antonio Community College and a certified network for teaching entrepreneurship instructor. And last but not least, when she's not sleeping, she's a QuickBooks Pro Advisor financial strategist. Crystal, glad you're with us. How you doing?
I'm a little tired. And as you're reading my bio, I'm going, that's why I'm tired, man. I'm going to have to
Yes,
retire from some of those things.
I think so. I truly do. I truly do. Okay, so I'll get my notes out here. Okay, so the topic of today's discussion is auto enroll. Have you seen that?
I have, but I think it can be a little confusing. Again, and I think it's what we've been saying. If depending on your age, you don't know what that means, right? And if I'm auto, okay, so you done everything for me. Okay, well, I'm not gonna think about it again until I'm 30, and I'll think about it when I'm 55.
Yeah, exactly. You're exactly right. And I think that is the problem. You're exactly right. People say, "Oh, I'm auto enrolled," and then they figure, "Oh, I don't have to do anything else." And to be fair to many of the employers, they're thinking, "Okay, we need to get them in the plan, but we can't just take money out of their paycheck because everybody has different needs that we don't
Yes,
know of." So some people can save 10%, some people can save only 3%, some people need some help. So auto enrolling is good because that gives them exposure, and then they're hoping that the advisor and and the record keeper can come in and do some education and then help people along and get to where they need to go. So it's a wonderful big first step. But that's the
right.
problem. It's just a first step because of exactly what you said. People are like, I used that like word. Oh my goodness. People say, okay, I'm enrolled. I'm not going to do anything else. I'm going to think about this. I got this done. Plus, it's a new job so many times, right? And we've got so much paperwork that they're throwing at you. You've got the health insurance, you got the retirement plan, you got the parking lot meter, you've got all these things that you need to do,
Right.
and
Yeah.
it's a little bit overwhelming. It's a little bit overwhelming.
Yeah.
And so, what starts as a nudge actually becomes a long term push into not doing anything.
Yeah.
Right? That's the
And mainly because I'm confused, and you told me I was already auto enrolled.
yeah.
Well, I don't have to. I don't have to do anything. Everything's done for me, right? So
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. You are spot on. And I think, we have to go back to our knitting here with regard to why is it that we're doing all this stuff in the first place? So, as you know, when I sell retirement plans, I'm talking about how do we increase participant outcomes? That is, how do we get them to the point where they're going to retire with dignity?
Mm-hmm.
And from the employer's point of view, you want your employees to do that because once you get into your 30s or 40s, the benefits become incredibly important.
Yeah.
That's generally when people start having children, sometimes even before then, which is
Mm-hmm.
super cool. But sometimes they're having children, sometimes their own parents are starting to decline. And so the benefits that you have, healthcare, 401k, medical, all of that really becomes important a little bit later on down the line. So we want to get ready for it. Hopefully, we're going to get into the company early, or hopefully at the beginning of our tenure with the company, we're going to take care of business. But many participants, they need help. Just like you're saying, so many times folks think I'm done and they're not done.
Right.
So, one of the things that I'm suggesting, and I think a lot of my colleagues are suggesting, is okay, if the participant gets in, let's work with that human behavior. We know that behavior is out there.
Mm-hmm.
We may not have known that when we first started because we tried to make everybody an investor, right? And people have a lot of stuff going on, and so they don't necessarily want to be an investor, but they certainly don't want to wake up at 64 and realize, oh, you've got a year or two more to work and you have nothing saved. They don't want
Yeah.
that. And that doesn't do well for the employer because now the participant is going to say, it's not my fault. It's not my fault. I'm the employee. I did what I was supposed to do. And so they're not going to blame themselves, right? They're going to
Nope.
say the employer didn't take enough out of my pay. And all of a sudden the employer's in the middle because at the beginning of their tenure, they're going to say, why are you taking my money? So the employer's kind of stuck, right? Stuck
Yeah,
between
he's
a
gonna
rock
get
and a
it
hard
on either end. Either
place.
end is
Exactly.
not going to be a pretty sight, but unless, of course, you have whoever's administering it from within the company, they're very very clear on what that is. But in my experience, that's usually not the case.
Yeah. So, it's one of those things where we have metrics when we're judging a plan. One of
Mm-hmm.
those metrics, of course, is participation.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm looking at a plan document or plan numbers and I see that only 20% of the people in the plan are actually registered, I'm thinking that's a problem. That's something that we need to talk about. If we do auto enroll, we can get those numbers up to 80%, 90%, right? Maybe
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
95%. But as you're indicating, participation isn't the end goal. Right? It's only a small number, and we can't rest our laurels on participation.
Right.
Participation with an auto enroll feature, right? So you enroll in the plan at 6%. Okay, so at least when you get to be 10 or 15 years in the company and you look at your balance, now you can talk with that financial advisor or that record keeper and say, okay, I've got this amount of money. What do I need to do?
Right.
Okay, well, you do the calculator and they tell you. So it's a great way to prompt the question, but somebody's got to prompt the question. So we go back to, okay, we know that participants aren't investors. So instead of trying to change the behavior, because that's just not working, let's work with the behavior. What if the participant does nothing? Can they still have a reasonable outcome? That's kind of the way a lot of the folks in the industry are going. If the participant just does nothing, they just show up,
Mm-hmm.
is that going to be a reasonable outcome for them? in most situations, reasonable is a very fungible word.
Fungible word.
Fungible. I like that word, fungible. It's a very fungible concept. So if we auto enroll them, the participants, and we get them auto enrolled at 6%, let's say, one thing we have to make sure they know is that they can get out of that, right? So they have to, we have to let them know you can get out of that before, I think it's usually 90 days is up. So you find out you're enrolled. Okay, you can get out of that if you need to. And then we need to make sure we put in that program, and most record keepers do, where they do a sweep every year to catch people. So every year that person has got to say, I want to get out. That just that's just one of those things. So the employer is giving you the opportunity. The employer is saying, if you don't want to do nothing, you're in.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully the employer is saying, okay, if you're in, every year we're going to increase your contributions until we get to at least 10%. Right. Right.
And that's a nice enticement.
It is. It works in a lot of really great ways. But the second thing the employer can do is tie the match to the auto increase, right? So
Mm.
instead of saying, okay, um, we're gonna get you in the plan.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna start you at 6%, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we could do what we call a safe harbor match and match 100% of the first three and 50% of the next two that you contribute. So if you put in 6%, we're gonna match 4% of that. That's a great thing to do,
Okay.
but it doesn't really encourage people to do more.
Mm.
So a better adjustment, a better thing for participants to do would be to do that auto enroll. And let's say we just enroll you at 1% and you get the match at 1%, 2%. So as you're there with the organization, they give you more match as you increase your contribution. So automatically you put more in and automatically the employer puts more in. That's not a bad way to go, right? So you put
No.
in 1%, they put in 1%. You put in 2%, they put in 2%. You put in 3%, they put in 3%. The beauty of that is the employee feels like you're right there with them. They're not
Mm-hmm.
just money's just not coming out of their paycheck, and they can
Mm-hmm.
see that that money is growing inside their account, right? So
Mm-hmm.
now they're not looking at the employer saying, "You're just taking money out of my pay." Why
Right.
are you taking money out of my pay? Now they can actually see, oh, this money is going here. And then that's going to prompt them to go, well, how much do I need? Right?
Yeah.
That's one way to do it. Another way I've heard and I've seen employers do is they say, okay, we're going to put you in at 5%, let's say. Okay. If you go up to 6%, then we'll match you there. We'll match you at 7%. We'll match you at 8%. We'll match you at 9%. So let's say the employer is thinking, I can, I want to match my employees. I want them to retire because at the end of the day, please don't, I think I said that at the end of the day. But anyway, when you get down to it, um, you want your people to retire so they can bring, you want that
Yeah.
expensive old folks, those employees,
Mm-hmm.
experience, let's call them that, those
Experience.
expensive, experienced employees to slowly weed themselves out and maybe do part-time consulting jobs to help out or something like that, but getting kind of off of your payroll, right?
Yeah.
Being mentors, reducing their amount of time they're on your payroll. And you want that new blood to come up. So as your
Mm-hmm.
organization grows, we're bringing the new people in, we're getting the old people go. But the old people can't go if they don't have any money.
No, they can't. They're gonna stay forever.
Yeah, right.
Mm-hmm.
So even at 65, Medicare is coming in, so maybe their Medicare is taken care of, but they still need money to eat. Right? So
Exactly.
the best thing to do is to get them to the point where they can leave, maybe do a little bit of work, and now you bring those younger folks in, and we get this nice little circle going. So how do we make sure that our younger folks can get to where they need to go? Well, we start off with the 6% match or the 5% match. Let's do that. We start off with the 5% match, and then everything above that. So for the next five above that, or maybe the next three above that, they match. So the employer puts in five. I'm sorry, the employer puts in one. The participant puts in five. The participant says, okay, they put in one more. The employer puts one in. They put
Mm-hmm.
in two more. The employer puts in two in. They put in three more. The employer puts in three in. So now the employer has a participant that's putting 8% into the plan, right? They're getting a 3% match. Now they're at 11. Most financial advisors suggest you contribute about 10 to 15% of your income. So you're already at 11. You're almost there. Now
Right.
the participant can say, okay, my employer is helping me out. The employer is saying, okay, I'm helping them out. Maybe I'm only putting in 5% of their pay, but they're getting very close to where they need to be, right? And it doesn't feel like I'm just taking money out of their pay, right? So if the employer wants to say, I can only do a 5% match, I'm saying do that at 6% rather than at 1%.
And I think what that does is, like what we talk about all the time, people, it's kind of a out of sight, out of mind thing, right? If yeah, every year we have open enrollment, or our plan advisor comes out and talks to us, and then we just store it away, right? But it's like, okay, and then we may even be half listening. But if you indicate, if it's a we're gonna match your input, then you now you got my full undivided attention, right? Because now, and so now every year I'm going to be looking, like, before we get to that time frame, hopefully I will be going, oh yeah, I need to really take a look at where I'm invested, if I have any questions, so that I'll know if I'm going to increase it and they're going to match it, then it's, where am I right now, right? So then they're much more engaged, I think, when there's something that's going to happen on an annual basis versus, you know, I'll hit you up in 20 years if I'm
Yeah,
still here in 20 years.
I think you're making an excellent point. I really do. I wanted to add to that that many of the young people I talk to, they'll only contribute up to the match. I mean,
Yes,
either they think, oh, if the employer is not going to put any more in, why should I?
right,
Well,
exactly.
it's not the employer's job to pay for your retirement. It's your job, right? They don't have to give you anything. It's your job to save for your retirement, not your employer. And then folks will say, well, I just don't have the money to drop in 10%. And I totally get that. I
Yeah,
really do. Some of us have to do a lot of, and I'm talking us, some of us, that is real people, have to do a lot of figuring to see how much we can actually put in, right?
yeah,
So I get that. But you want to pay yourself first. Let's do that before you pay everybody else. Pay yourself first and make it your goal to get to 15%. And of course, as a retirement plan advisor, I'm going to say, and an emergency plan. 15% and an emergency plan. On top of all the other things you have to pay for, on top of all the other money you don't have, right? This man is saying put more money away. Yes, but yes, I am. So I get it, but you're absolutely right. Spot on. If they feel like, hey, if I do this and the employer is going to give me some money, it's a much better situation than if the employer puts in 3% and you put in 3% and you do
mm-hmm,
nothing. It doesn't
right,
encourage you to go and seek if you need to put more in. You're thinking you're done. And in actuality, you may not even be able to keep up with inflation when you get to be retired, which is a
exactly.
is a sad scene. Sad scene.
And I think that someone was telling me the other day, and I thought this was, he was talking about, I think it was right, when there was like young people coming into corporate America, and old people leaving, right? Your experienced people leaving out early enough, they don't stay there forever and ever and ever. But what he was saying to some of our business owners was, you know, bridging that gap, right, between the wisdom that's about to leave your organization, and that wisdom has been there for years, so they know exactly how everything works, bridging that gap. Yeah, they become consultants, but then they kind of mentor that new person coming in, right? So that they don't just get thrown into uh, the playground without any instructions how to interact with the natives that are already in the playground. And then at the same time, those senior individuals can pass down what what really works for the company, what doesn't work for the company, and you have a better transition period, right?
Yeah.
Uh, Especially if you have an employee that just really cares about the company, right? A lot of times that's why people hang on so long, is because
True.
they may have been there at the inception, right? And yeah, I can go and retire, but I really love this content. I like the energy. I like what I'm doing here. I like what the company is doing. I'm 100% behind the mission. So that kind of helps that whole process, right?
Yep.
So that one will be more eager once they pass on knowledge and they're sure that everything is going to carry on, and the
Yeah.
company is going to be, the needs are going to be met. And then they can bring in the new people. And then the new person can see, oh, wow, this person has been in this company this long. They've contributed, or the company has grown because of that. Okay, I can stay around in this company. I like this feeling, right? Right.
That's a good
So
point. That's a good point.
I like this feeling that this is a company that I really could stay at
Hmm.
for a long period of time.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good point. There's such a tendency to come in, leave, and do something else, leave and do something else. It's almost like we're all turning into gig workers, right?
Yeah.
And admittedly, if you start a company, I mean, I didn't start my company so that I could help my employees retire. No, I started my company so that I could retire, right?
But that
So
becomes a problem when they've been around
it does.
too
It
long
does.
and
Yeah.
you are relying upon them at the
Yes, it
same
does.
time. So you don't really want them to go because you're relying on the knowledge base,
Yep.
and then but at the same time, you're looking at the salary base. Their salary is going to continue to grow up. You can't just stall them out.
Right.
And then you could bring in some younger blood
Hmm.
with a lighter uh, um, a package,
Hmm.
and so it is a win-win for the company. And if they become consultants, that's a whole different kind of ball game. You don't have all the employee fees.
Yeah.
When I left a company, that's what I was. I was a consultant. So basically, my employer became my client. It was a
Hmm.
great feeling because one day I was an employee, and that employee mentality that they got. And then the next day, I was an expert in my field. Same person,
There you go. There you go.
but
Yeah.
but now, oh wow, okay, yeah, Crystal has all of the information. Didn't I have all the information yesterday? But okay, whatever. You're paying me more now,
There you go. There you
and
go.
you so now you're respecting me more.
Yeah. And it works vice versa, right? I mean,
Right,
most of us
exactly.
respect our clients
Yeah.
more than we
Then we
we
do we
respect our clients.
Yeah,
Hopefully, we
right,
respect
exactly.
our
So
clients.
yeah, so it's a win-win, but it is a good way, especially if it's um employer or business owner that really sees that. I think you get that when um the founder or the CEO decides that, when they make that decision to be like an ESOP, right?
Yes.
You're not just thinking of you. You're thinking of, one, the longevity of this company that you build. One day you're going to leave it, but also you want your employees to be feel like they're invested. They're part of the team. They're part of the family. So now you're going to really get more out of them that way than, you know, browbeating them as employees. You really do get so much more out of them when they feel like, you know, I'm
We're
responsible,
contributors.
right?
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And then you have that, then the retirement is a great benefit
It's
for them.
always a great benefit. Trust me.
It is. It is. It is. Yeah. You know what I
Anyway,
see when I see young people, and I had this conversation the other day. When I see young people really start to think about the future, is when their parents start to decline, right?
yeah.
And now they're going to mom's and dad's house more often to look after them,
Mhm.
and then then there's always about the money because you look and go, oh wow, mom and dad didn't really have a good retirement plan, right? And so now, the children are having to supplement because they can't afford everything, or basically, a lot of times they have to move in with you, or somebody, because they can't afford that. And so now that's a good thought. Now you're like, well, wait a minute, where am I, right?
Yeah,
What am I doing? Because especially if you don't have any children,
yeah,
you give that a lot of thought.
sure.
Will I have
One day
enough money?
we should definitely do a show. You're talking about a couple of really key concepts there. One is what we call the sandwich generation,
Mm-hmm. Mm.
and where the a person reaches their prime earning years, their children are about ready to go to college, and their parents are retiring in their home. That
Yeah.
is in Junior's home, right? And Junior's stuck in the middle, going, "How am I supposed to save for retirement?" And we just keep that ball rolling and rolling to where the family doesn't get what the second concept you're knocking on the door of, which is generational wealth, right? So we're
Mm-hmm.
unable to build that generational wealth, and we have the sandwich generation. You put those two together, and we have a bit of a disaster on our hands. So that's we should definitely do a show about that and have some folks come back to have some ideas about that. We can definitely do that.
Yeah, I
Um,
think that would be an excellent show
yeah,
because
definitely
that's
do that.
where
And
a
it
lot of
probably will
people.
be a series because there's a lot to chew on. But I did want to say, in response to one of the things that you said, that when I do those meetings, and I guess sometimes we call them the um, Social Security meeting, or sometimes they call it the end of work meeting.
Mm-hmm.
But they're generally populated by people who are in the exact situation that you were talking about, where they're in their 30s or 40s. They're not close to retirement at all, but their parents are. And so their parents are having to ask questions about Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. Well, how does that work? How do you figure all of that out? Um,
Mm-hmm.
and and they don't know. They got to get help someplace. Fortunately, there's a lot of people don't like to admit it, but there are some government agencies and people around that can help folks make those decisions. So we should definitely um, we should definitely do that. But you're knocking on the door of some really important topics.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I have had a couple conversations with people. Their parents are transitioning, and the experience that I had with my mother, you pass that on,
Hmm.
and so the people feel that they have someone that they can speak to on that subject. But the same thing, because you know retirement or being able to afford to retire is sometimes elusive thought, like a big dream. Yeah, one day, right? But in between, um, A plus B equals retirement, you're like, what's the B part? How am I going to do that, right?
Hmm.
Based upon all of the your responsibilities, your salary. We can't, we don't have crystal balls to be able to think about what the future is. But also, with all of the external chatter about Social Security going away, right? So wait, if Social Security is not going to be there, which I have my own opinion about that. That's a conversation as well, because unless we're gonna get rid of unless we're gonna get rid of employees in everybody's company, I don't know how we gonna be outside of having enough money for Social Security. Now, unless you're stealing it on the other side, but long as they're employees, um, your Social Security and Medicare is a mandatory deduction from your paycheck. You can't
Well, even if
move
you're
out.
not, right? If you're a
Yeah,
business owner, right? I
yeah.
mean,
Even as your business owner, you have a little bit more flexibility that you shouldn't, but you do. But as an employee, mm-mm. Can't ask for that the part. Just don't take that part out next week. I need all my money.
Right.
And those of us in payroll go, sorry, we
Mm.
can adjust some other things, but those two we can't make no adjustments on.
It is what it is, right?
Yeah,
We just have
exactly.
to understand what it is and then do our thing,
Yeah,
react accordingly. So I tell
yes,
you what,
exactly.
great topics,
Mm-hmm.
but we are at the end part of the broadcast. So I'm going to read your bio,
Mm-hmm.
and then we'll call it a show. All right.
All right, sounds good.
So everyone, thank you for watching. You've been watching On the Patio with Crystal and Javon. Today we were talking about auto enroll and how that's a great start, but it's not the end zone, and how that
Mm-hmm.
feeds into the actual real welfare of your clients.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
here's Crystal Mitchell. She's a business coach and consultant. She's the CEO of Mitchell Business Solutions, co-director of Recycling Black Dollar. She's the co-host of the Business Zone, that other weekly radio show. She's an instructor at Mount San Antonio Community College, a certified network for teaching entrepreneurship instructor, and my favorite, a QuickBooks Pro Advisor financial strategist. That's only my favorite because for the first, I don't know, 8 times that I said it, I tripped up over
You
the
can
words
actually say
horribly.
the whole word.
Crystal, it has been great to see you. I will see you next week on the patio,
Yes.
and we'll have another exciting topic to
Riveting
talk
conversation,
about.
right?
Riveting, riveting, riveting.
Riveting. Oh.